human rights organizations are sounding the alarm that more young girls around the world are at risk of becoming child brides due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic hardships it causes. The group, Save the Children, estimates nearly 500,000 additional girls are at risk of entering into child marriages this year. That's on top of the 12 million girls who were already projected to be married off in 2020. Over a 5-year period, the rights group estimates an extra 2.5 million girls could be at risk. A new article from the Associated Press is exploring the issue and telling the stories of some of these children around the world. The story was produced with the support of the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. Krista Larson wrote that article, and she is the West Africa Bureau Chief for the Associated Press. There have been a number of, government agencies, humanitarian organizations that for many years have been trying to reduce the number of young girls that are being married off, and it has been working. The numbers have been going down, and now this pandemic threatens to undo a lot of that good work. What is causing the numbers to go up?
Well, I think when we spoke with families, a lot of what they told us was that even though there hadn't been a large number of COVID-19 cases, there had been a number of government restrictions that had impacted household income. In the region where we traveled in eastern Sierra Leone, the border was closed with neighboring Guinea, and people were less able to do commerce than before. And as they saw their income shrink, they were more willing to accept offers or proposals of marriage from men in the community with regards to their eldest daughter.
So you mentioned one area. What are the regions and the countries that this is happening the most, that you're seeing the increase?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think according to the data that Save the Children released, South Asia was predicted to have the greatest expansion in terms of girls getting married before the age of 18, followed by West and Central Africa, which is where I'm based. And the remaining figures that go towards that total of nearly 500,000 were elsewhere in Africa and Asia primarily, but also some in the Middle East. Mm-hmm.
So, in the article, what you learn is essentially what you just brought up, that many of these families are buckling under the financial strain, the additional financial strain that the pandemic has brought in. These are already families that are on the edge. Often there is money exchanged, a dowry in exchange for a daughter, but also it's one less mouth to feed, one less person that you have to worry about in the house. And so there's like a short-term gain here for these families. And, sometimes the short-term gain is what you need to, stay alive until the next season. But there are long-term risks. Can we talk about the ramifications of young girls being married off?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that health workers are most concerned about, obviously, is these girls falling pregnant at an age earlier than they would have otherwise. Younger pregnant women are obviously at much higher risk for complications because their bodies aren't ready yet to bear a child. So someone who's 13, 14, 15 is at a greater risk of things such as preeclampsia or high blood pressure or complications during delivery that sometimes result in maternal mortality. And of course, there's also the result of fewer resources in terms of workers within the economy, because young girls who once married are tasked with so many chores at home, they're less likely to finish their education. And one of the things that was really striking in talking to these girls was how many of them wanted to become nurses or doctors. And these are positions that Sierra Leone in particular badly needs, and yet you have a substantial portion then of a generation who's not going to be contributing in those kinds of ways to the country.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting that many of these young women understood the value of education and really knew what they were losing when their education was being cut short. It also seemed like for a number of these sort of cultures and communities, they're in the middle of, there's kind of this middle zone where they're aware of the fact that it might already be illegal in the country for underage marriage might be illegal, and also there are some social pressures indicating that it's not something something that's, I don't know if to frown upon might be too strong of a word, but it's not something that's celebrated because they seem to sort of do it in hiding. But then, on the other side, there are all these pressures that are pushing them towards this decision, and there is sort of a cultural acceptance too. So what are authorities doing to combat these trends, and how is the pandemic impacting the efforts to stop child marriage around the world?
Well, one of the things that the police are trying to do is to increase awareness, obviously, of the fact that the legal marriage age in many of these countries is 18. But, the difficulty that they run into is that the brides themselves are often very reluctant to go to authorities, and it's only in the cases of most extreme abuse or abandonment that we see some of these girls coming forward to report their situation. I think that the NGOs who have done such great work around this issue are somewhat limited because a lot of, the majority of these marriages are taking place in the provinces and in regions that are not only far from the capital, but in some cases difficult to get to, even in the best of times. And so now when there's concern about, restrictions on people traveling in between different parts of the country, they've had to really curtail some of the education and awareness that they were doing in the schools to promote self-confidence and to educate girls about what the law in their country says.
Well, Krista, it's a really insightful article. I encourage people to seek it out and read it. And it's a real reminder that, even as we get a vaccine here in the U.S. and we feel like we're going to be emerging from this pandemic, the impact of the pandemic beyond the health concerns will continue to ripple in certain countries for perhaps decades. So thanks for shining a light on this really important issue. Krista Larson, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.